Onion Cycles podcast is about thought-provoking, emotion-evoking, action-driven, step-by-step guidance to explore the unique, glorious, and wonderful ocean of your being. Because healing is a multi-layered process of getting to know oneself. Become the self-empowered empiric researcher by discovering the unique layers of your existence. With your host, Nadine Alma, welcome to the Holistic Healing Hub. Welcome to the Onion Cycles podcast. Hello and a warm welcome back, my beloved fellow healing onions. How is life treating you? I hope you're all well. I hope you're kind to yourselves and you're kind to others. I hope that on this journey of self-discovery and becoming a self-empiric, self-empowered researcher of your own psyche, of knowing yourself, you're feeling good and you're feeling driven and you're feeling motivated to discover more, because I'm quite frankly very excited about today, because today we're kicking off yet another series. This series is called the Being Human series, and I am over the moon because it wasn't planned. It was an intuitive feeling that I just thought I need to bring this into my content. I want to make a series out of what I read in a book. It was quite spontaneous, and usually I stick to my plans, but this time my gut was like, no, we're not going to go with the brain today. So this is it. I present to you the Being Human series. It's going to be 8 weeks, so 8 episodes. We're going to start with the introduction today, where I will outline the following seven episodes. I will outline how I came across the source material, why it is important to me, why it will, I hope, serve you in your journey, on your journey as well. And then next week we will dig deep and dive straight into the Being Human Essential series. So I want to start off today that I am by absolutely no means a religious. I'm spiritual, meaning I seek for the sake of seeking, and I don't want to limit myself to anything at all, and I want to stay open, and I want my heart to stay open. So this is not going to be a religious matter. I'm not gonna discuss Catholics, and I am not gonna discuss any spiritual or religious authority as well. However, I want to point out that coming across this book called Mary Magdalene Revealed by Meggan Watterson, and I will put that in the description below, I was on a journey of exploring what divine femininity is. So I came from that point of view, and by reading this book of hers, I realized that most mainstream institutionalized Catholics believe that humans are sinful and have been freed from that sin because Jesus died on a cross for them. So after reading that book, it was very apparent and very clear to me that we now know defying and shaming the divine feminine and making Catholicism a male spiritual authoritative institution is withholding gospels and curating what has been fed to the masses for 2 millennia, and that caused a lot of generational trauma. And it is only as well just one part of a whole. And by leaving out Mary Magdalene and having her gospel tried to be destroyed, because it was apparently only found in the 70s, I think, is a very huge step forward, I think, in healing the world and healing essentially the repressed feminine. And when I say that, I mean that feminine and masculine energy is in each and every one of us. It doesn't have to do anything to do with gender as such. So that brings me to Mary Magdalene, or more specific, her recovered gospel and what she describes as the 7 powers of wrath. And this is the only part that we will discuss in this series. So don't be alarmed. This will not be a religious discourse. This will not be a discussion about spiritual authority, religious authority, or what faith is right or not right, and how dogmatic we should be, how patronizing or hostile we should be towards other faiths. Absolutely not. This evolved from what I read in that book, and because it's such a main source of what I'm going to present to you, I needed to address where I got it from. There are a lot of different views out there, and that I believe is innately human, because the fragment the fragments that we are as humanity and living on this planet, the fragments are always smaller than the whole. So it is quite natural for humans to have a variety of different views, because every one of us is individual, every one of us is different, and every one of us perceive the world differently around us. So there's no constricting, there's no judging, there's no deciding or telling someone they're wrong and I'm right, or I'm wrong and they're right. There is, quite frankly, no wrong or right. And to put it blankly, it is like I know nothing, and that is essentially all I know. It's just a discourse, it's just a conversation, it's just a food for thought, as they say. So if this doesn't resonate with you, please feel free, just do whatever feels good to you and don't listen to it. If it doesn't serve you, then it's not meant for you. And we will not talk about spiritual authority, as I said. We will talk about what Mary describes, because to me it was essential to understanding ailments of the metaphysical kind. We talked about the bodies before, we had the 4 bodies series, and there are the mental, emotional, and spiritual body, and they sort of come back every time it is about healing something. We talked about procrastination last week, and we talked about the pain body, coined by Eckhart Tolle. And this is basically another name for a tormented, wounded, unhealed, fragmented emotional body. So, because of all this, ultimately contributes to a better understanding for who we are and what triggers us, why it triggers us, and how to work with it, work through it, release it, integrate it. That's why I wanted to make a series about it. So we will talk about these 7 powers of wrath, as Mary Magdalene calls them, also because it's simply astounding how the same thing reoccurs in different belief systems, right? Because basically, the same thing can be talked about in alchemy. So I am by no means any authority in talking about alchemy, because I only started my journey and I'm not fluent in speaking about alchemy at all. But alchemy describes a process of 7 stages as well. And in that process, we basically try to achieve a freedom from all ailments, from all that holds us back, from all that is lower vibration. So in the process of alchemy, we transmute and transform energy to attain, metaphorically speaking, a status of gold. We try to clean our soul to become spiritual. And that then brings up, personally to me, the question of, well, what is that paradox of being human but striving nonetheless all the time to become divine? So, this human divinity paradox that is also found in the Bible and in other religious texts and other teachings in this world is what really resonated with me, and why I wanted to bring those so-called 7 drafts to my content, to the podcast, and serve that information to you, is because I don't know if you can relate to this, but I always I fail to see where the middle line is, where the middle path is between being divine and being human. Like, we're human and we have these flaws and these traumas and emotions, and we're here for that, and we came to earth apparently to feel all of that. But why are we then still striving to be divine and become better and work towards ascension? So I'm always like torn between those two, and I don't find the middle path. And I feel like this topic of discussing what it means to be human is essentially what Mary Magdalene reveals in her gospel about the seven powers of wrath, because she says that these seven powers serve as the template of what it means to be human, what it means to feel all of that and work through all of that, so that by the end we find that we can actually, or so she says, and apparently Jesus lived by that, be human but also divine. So I found it very intriguing. I hope you do too. And with that said, I find that each of these elements are not contained within equal measure. So, what I'm gonna explain after as being the seven powers of wrath, they all of them are not contained within all of us in equal measure. It is the ingredients list of the ego. So it is what makes life hard. It is what makes us suffer. It is what makes us human. So innately, we are not sin, and within each and every one of us lies the solution of becoming free of what ails us. So there's not an external outer power that absolves us from our sins, that can give us absolution. It's just ourselves that can do that by working through it. And that to me is like working through the mental body, cleaning the mental body, cleaning the emotional body, so that in essence the ego can be still used as a tool for extreme survival, but it doesn't hold us back from seeing our percentage of divinity, if you want. So these powers can potentially hold us captive for hours, days, weeks, months, years, even. And if they become conscious, it makes an informative list and easier to come back to love. And that is what I believe integration means. It means always choosing love over fear. And now, without further ado, I will list and give a short explanation on how I understood these seven powers of wrath and how Mary Magdalene describes them in her gospel, how she reveals them in her gospel. And note that the following 7 weeks will be dedicated to each single one of them separately, because there's quite a lot to unpack. And I just wanted to give an introduction to the series because, quite frankly, I was blown away and I absolutely adore this concept. What she says is the first form is darkness, the second is desire, the third is ignorance, the fourth is a seal for death, the fifth is the realm of the flesh, the sixth is the foolish wisdom of the flesh, and the seventh is the wisdom of the wrathful person. There are seven powers of wrath, and what to me was quite astonishing was that every single one of them I have lived through or am still living in. I'm curious. I always say sharing is caring. So if you feel drawn to comment or let me know anything, what this content did to you, what this episode or my podcast generally does with you, please feel free to share. Maybe there's a person out there who goes through the very exact same experience and just needs to read whatever it is you have to offer to them so that they don't feel alone. To me personally, it was like a revelation, and calling it the blueprint of what it means to be human, a template of what it means to be human, was so exact and resonated enormously. And that is also why I called it the Being Human series, because in essence, we will depict all 7 of these powers and look at them from a very modern point of view of what some of us can go through. Now, here's a short description of what every one of those 7 powers essentially compressed and concisely mean. The first form is darkness, meaning that it's sort of like a heaviness, and I personally would describe it as a depression. It's total hopelessness, loneliness. It's feeling trapped in your life, in your work, in your relationships. It's constricted also. And, well, to say it bluntly, everything sucks. And to an extent where everything doesn't matter anymore anyway. So there's a numbness as well. And when I read it, I immediately felt drawn to the description of it being the essence of what depression feels like, what depression doesn't necessarily look like, but feels inside in the soul. The second one is desire, meaning that there's like this craving, and it's not just like craving chocolate or something. It's more like attachment and clinging to stuff. It's clinging to the past, to the future, clinging to people or situations. It's like wanting to be where I am not at right now. It's the paradox of saying, oh, I will be happy when da da da. And we discussed a little bit about this in our episode called Joie de vie. So, the joy of life. If you haven't listened to this one, I will put it up there for you to check out after this one. But it's essentially this: there needs to be an external factor to be able to say that we're happy. So we're constantly on the chase to something or hold on to something in order to be happy, to be content, which is sort of like a very demanding and probably never ending challenging way of attaining contentment and attaining happiness, because you're relying on something external rather than within you, or finding something within you that gives you that faith or that knowledge or that sentiment of balance, that everything's all right as it is and that you can be happy right now in the moment. And then the third is ignorance. And it's not just a malicious kind of ignorance where people just say, I don't know, because of a certain situation, a certain sentence, a certain word that someone uttered, they are dumb or you would never talk to them again. It's not an ignorance where there is consciously bad intentions behind. It's more like an ignorance that is a lack of awareness. It's like an unconsciousness about something. So the first thing that came to my mind was the other day when I was driving in my car, and I was new to the area and I didn't knew the area. So I stopped at a traffic light, and while I was concentrating on if I'm allowed to go left or not, and the person behind me honked continuously for like 30 seconds. It blasted me, and it shook me to the core, and I had like a racing heart, and I felt like I'm a total loser and I'm so worthless. And in fact, I think the only thing that happened was that person wasn't familiar with what we discussed in the episode called Sonder. So there's like an unconscious ignorance, I would say, on the part of that person. And I'm not giving that example because I'm free from ignorance myself. I have realized that I am very much in a judgmental position often enough still. However, that was just the first situation that came to mind, and that sort of gave me the opportunity to realize that it might not have been a me problem, it might have been a him problem. It's not a deficit, so sometimes it's valuable for healing as well. Like if I'm not aware that this person teaches me something with their behavior, then that might also be a protection, because I'm not ready yet from the energy or from the revelations from it. I'd say that a child that is physically or emotionally abused at home, if it would be aware that this situation isn't supposed to happen, it might just be that much more threatening to their life than going through it in a haze of thinking, oh, this is normal, everyone does that. And I believe that in adulthood, when we start talking about our childhood and people look at us and say, what, that happened to you, what, that that's not normal, then you realize, oh, all right, so it's not normal, and now I can, in this adult kind of mindset, work through what this does to me emotionally. But as a child, you're very much in need of some sort of ignorance. So we can only see so much at once, is what I'm trying to say. But unconscious states we fall into and act from are basically what is meant with this third power of ignorance. So then we have the fourth, which is seal for death. And I was taken aback by this one because personally I have struggled with suicidal thoughts for the most part since I was 7. Like the earliest memory I think was 6, 7 years old. It isn't a dramatic kind of thought to me because I was looking up at the stars in the night sky, and I was just knowing that I belonged up there and not down here. So for me, I thought this fourth seal for death means suicidal thoughts, but in fact, it's much more. It's could be transcribed, if you go for the 7 sins, it could be described as gluttony. So it's the unconscious suicide, if you will. It's choices that endanger your health and impair your longevity. It's excess that is harmful. It's no balance at all. It's excess in food, it's excess in no movement, it's excess in movement, it's everything that doesn't have balance to it, and that is sort of like an unconscious suicide is how she describes it. Then we have the fifth, which is the realm of the flesh, which when I read it first, there were immediately question marks in my head because I wasn't entirely sure what she meant with that. But what she says is basically lustful people. And I would say that there is a beauty to people who have a zest for life, people who can relish and savor something to eat for the best part of 40 minutes while others are done with their meal after 10 and celebrate life to its fullest. I also believe that sometimes the realm of the flesh can be a very empowered thing to experience. For example, if you have gone through something that is very traumatic, that is related to your body or sexuality, if you have been abused in that way, and after years and decades of working through these issues, you suddenly are able to feel joy again by taking in or being fully present in your body, that is very empowering. But I feel like with all things, that what is meant by the realm of flesh in this way is entirely identifying with the body, assessed for living, and forgetting that we have a soul as well. So it is like tripping us up if we're just in the body, if we're just in this human experience, and if we don't contribute to our mental, emotional, spiritual bodies, if you know what I mean. So it's just focusing on the very material, on the very lustful part of existence, if you want to call it. We also have the sixth form, which is foolish wisdom of the flesh. And that is described, or could be translated, if you go with the seven sins again, into sloth. So anything that is a mechanism, a coping mechanism, that is a reluctance to do what's good for us. It is basically using the body as a scapegoat. It is like, I know that yoga and breathing exercises would contribute more to the state of mind that I'm in right now, but instead I'm gonna cope by watching Netflix for 4 hours straight until I fall into bed, and then repeat the next day with the same sluggish, sloth like energy of not looking after yourself, not going outside, not drinking enough, not getting yourself up to go on a walk or anything like that. We also have the seventh power, which is the wisdom of the wrathful person. And I found that one also interesting. It's like a compulsion of rage. So I have a right to be angry, but I don't have a right to spread it. And I still have problems with that myself, because I only discovered that wrath or anger is a emotion that I wasn't really allowed to feel growing up. So I never found a healthy way of letting this emotion flow through my body and be done with it and work through it. I suppressed it and I felt bad when I felt it. So the compulsion of rage, and the motto that I got from a comedian, I think she's called Hannah Gatsby, is I have a right to be angry, but not to spread it, meaning that no one else is responsible for how I feel inside, in the sense that they might have said something that awakes that emotion, but that doesn't give me the right to mirror it back to them or mirror it out in the world. So I have to work through it. It's it's like anger can devour us from the inside. It's like a toxin. It's like toxic. If it goes out, it is quite freeing, but if it's not processed and if it's not looked at, it becomes pure poison, and that can put toxicity into your life for years on end. And that poison goes into our core, our heart. Like it's putting up walls, or it looks like putting up walls. It's looking like everyone outside of the ones I love, of the family unit, or even everyone outside of myself is dangerous, is a threat, and is unworthy, and I just refuse to interact with them. So it is sort of like an entry drug to all of the other forms, in a way, because in order to not become more vulnerable, so if we keep up that toxicity in the form of anger and wrath, we sort of then go into all of these coping mechanisms, like we hide behind the walls of ignorance, we hide behind gluttony, behind sloth, and then eventually we nearly fall into a darkness, into a depression. And that is sort of like what she meant by describing the wisdom of the wrathful person as an entry drug to all of the other six forms that she described prior. That is a lot to process. It took me quite a while, and I read the book two times, and I also made a lot of notes to make sense of all of this. But as I said, we are going to have a lot of time with this. We are going to dive deep, and I personally look forward to this as well, because I'm going to do all of these exercises along with you. For all of you who forgot, or all of you who are new here, welcome. And don't forget to take the opportunity to download your free worksheet on my website, www.wonderfinder.org. All that is on that worksheet is notes about everything we talk about, and also exercises that sort of develop that approach of as I think, so I feel, so I act, because true change only comes from taking action and making it happen. So those exercises are designed to dive deeper into the weekly episode topics. And now that we have gone through all of this, I am looking forward to the next episode where we will start with the first form, which is darkness. And until then, I open my heart wide to you. I appreciate you, I see you, I understand you, and I love you very much. Stay safe, stay true to yourself, love yourself, and be kind to yourself. All the best from my heart to yours. Until next time, my beloved fellow healing onions.